Demographics. Japan is home to 127,500,000 people. The capital of Japan is Tokyo. Population 12,790,000 people. Some major cities of Japan are Yokohama, population 3,632,000 people. Osaka, population 2,636,000 people. Nagoya, population 236,000 people. Language and dialects. 99% of Japan's citizens speak Japanese as their primary language. Japanese is in the Japonic language family and seems to be unrelated to Chinese and Korean. However, Japanese is heavily borrowed from Chinese, English, and other languages. In fact, 49% of Japanese words come from Chinese and 9% come from English. Japan also has 7 major dialects. The main difference between each dialect is pitch, use of inflections, vocabulary, and the use of particles. Japan has a constitutional monarchy headed by an emperor. The emperor is Akihito. Right now, we are in the 29th year of his reign. The political leader of Japan is the Prime Minister, who is also the head of the cabinet. The Prime Minister is Yasuo Fukuda. Japan has a bicameral legislature, and it is made up of a 480-seat House of Representatives and a 242-seat House of Councilors. Japan also has a 4-tier court system headed by the 15-member Supreme Court. The country has a European-style civil law system.
Eras of Japan. There are many eras or periods in Japanese history, the earliest being the Jomon period and the most recent being the post-war period. It is widely accepted that the first people living in Japan were living there during prehistoric times as hunters and gatherers, but it was unknown until the 1950s, where there were excavations that led to the discovery of bowls and other pieces of pottery that have been found to be from 4000 BC. During the years 1185 and 1603 were what is known as the feudal era of Japan. The many different parts of Japan were run by daimyos, powerful families with military warlords called shogun that worked under them, and warriors called samurai. At the end of the feudal era and the beginning of the Azuchi Momoyama period, Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu worked together to unite Japan by defeating other daimyo that were trying to forcibly take over Japan themselves. However, it wasn't until the Edo period that Tokugawa Ieyasu united Japan under himself as the first main emperor. Due to problems with people from other countries coming to Japan for supplies and to try and change their ways of belief, it was cut off from most of the world between the years of 1603 and 1868. During the Edo period, samurai oversaw making sure people followed the laws, but during the Meiji era, the use of samurai was removed and new police officers, like people, took their place. It was during this time that samurai were also banned from carrying their swords in public. Since the Meiji era, Japan has been in what is known as the modern era, with 4 different eras over the time: the Meiji era, Taisho era, Showa era, and Heisei era, which is in its 29th year. These eras are named by which emperor ruled them during their time.
Family patterns have changed over the decades from multi-generational households to the typical nuclear family with 2 parents and their children, particularly in the more urban areas. Some families may have an elderly parent or relative residing with them. During the second half of the 20th century, new laws were introduced reducing a patriarchal authority and awarding greater legal rights for women. Marriage is based upon mutual attraction rather than the one traditional arranged marriage. In rural and urban areas, there are differences in family composition, educational achievement, and workforce inclusion. Among the urban population, there are social differences between the white-collar, salaried middle class, and the blue-collar working classes. Historically, women in Japan were expected to be subordinate to men and were confined to domestic matters only. They were excluded from certain sacred areas and were expected to show difference in hierarchical authority in both speech and behavior. In 1947, a new legal framework was established affording equality to both sexes, giving women more access to education, job opportunities, and career advancement. Today, however, the changes in the gender gap, equal pay, and educational attainment are slowly moving. The concept of total equality remains an ideal rather than the norm at present. Children are the center of the family in Japan. Child rearing is seen as an extremely important role. Strong family bonds are developed early on, particularly between the mother and child. Compulsory education commences from the age of 6 with 6 years in elementary school, which is followed by 3 years in middle school. Although compulsory education ends with middle school, many go on to further education. Prior to compulsory school, there are 2 strands of preschool education: nursery school from the age of 3, kindergarten from 5 years. It is important to dress smartly and conservatively when talking about business attire. Men should wear a dark suit in the winter months with white shirt and tie that is not brightly colored. As the summer months can be very hot, it is acceptable to wear half-sleeve shirts and light gray suits. Women should also dress conservatively, wearing their hair either short or tied back. Conspicuous jewelry or short skirts are not considered appropriate. The Japanese attire. A kimono is a traditional Japanese clothing for both men and women. They have different types of kimonos worn for different situations. They require an obi, which is a belt that goes around the front and ties in the back. It is worn less aside from special occasion. There is street fashion clothing that is an unusual type of fashion worn by young Japanese. It is a sorted trend that includes mixed pants, dresses, tops, and all colorful designs. The Lolita is the most popular types of Japanese street fashion clothing. It breaks down into different Lolita styles, such as goth Lolita clothing, which is characterized by clothes that suggest a Victorian fashion image or a porcelain Victorian doll. The sweet Lolita, trimmed with lots of lace and incorporates a lot of pastel colors. The everyday style is worn by adults in modern Japan is like a Western clothing. Women prefer dresses, jeans, t-shirts, and other ordinary clothes. Wedding styles includes kimonos called yuchikake for the bride. Yuchikake are very long all the way around the garment instead of just trailing only in the back. It needs assistance to hold up during the ceremony. It is usually rented for the ceremony. Social hierarchy. There is the upper class, which is the utmost power and monetary freedom of high status, and is divided into 2 sub-levels. The royal family, which are people who belong to the ancient Japanese royal families who ruled Japan throughout many centuries. But they don't rule anymore, but still keep their high status. There is also the business class, which includes people who are in the big-time business owners in Japan, which rule the country in means of economy, and the highest earnings segment of society. The next is the middle class, which is the service class. It is comprised of a man who incorporates majority of the Japan population as well as a major part of Japanese society. They work on salary basis for business class people in companies and firms. It also includes businessmen who don't have large-scale businesses but run small ones. There are 2 levels. The first one is the low-scale businessmen, which is running a business of their own but at a small scale. And the second is servicemen who do their jobs in a company. The last class is the lower class, which is also known as the labor class. It is the lower part of the population of Japan as well as the society. They perform day-to-day working on earning their livelihood. They are people who earn lowest wages and face financial instability. It also includes homeless and underprivileged who live on the grants of the government.
In Japan, people greet one another by bowing. This bow can be a nod of the head or a bow from the waist. The nod of the head is the more informal way to greet someone, while the longer, deeper bow is a greater sign of respect. Bowing is also a way to make a request, apologize, say thank you, or ask someone for a favor. Different types of gifts are given depending on the occasion. Gifts in sets of 4 are usually avoided because it's considered an unlucky number in Japanese superstition. There is also no 4th floor in buildings, just as there is not usually a 13th floor in the United States, since the word for 4 is pronounced the same as the word for death. When a gift is being given, both the giver and the receiver are to use both hands. The most important table etiquette in Japan is saying customary phrases before and after a meal. It is traditional for Japanese people to say,
Itadakimasu.
meaning I humbly receive or let's eat, before a meal, and
Gochisousama deshita.
after a meal. These phrases not only mean thanks for the food, but also indicate the beginning and ending of a meal. While eating with chopsticks, do not directly pass food from your chopsticks to somebody else's chopsticks. It is also important not to vertically stick chopsticks into food, especially into a bowl of rice. Also, it is not polite to wave your chopsticks above food dishes or to use your chopsticks to point at somebody. If someone is struggling to pick something up with their chopsticks, you are not supposed to help them, as it is impolite to have 2 sets of chopsticks picking up the same food. This reminds the Japanese of a funeral ritual in Japan, which is considered utterly morbid. It is expected to take off your shoes in a restaurant, hotel, etc. There will always be a place to put your shoes. In addition, you will be given slippers to wear. There are often different slippers for the bathroom. You should never wear the normal slippers into the bathroom if the bathroom slippers are provided. Japan's 2 major religions are Shintoism and Buddhism. Religion, however, is not a part of everyday life for Japanese people. Customs and rituals are usually turned to during special occasions such as birth, weddings, funerals, visiting shrines and temples, on religious holidays and festivals. The 2 religions, Shintoism and Buddhism, coexist very well and even complement each other to a certain degree. Many Japanese people consider themselves Shintoists, Buddhists, or even both. Shintoism is as old as Japanese culture itself. The exact origins of Shintoism is unclear. Shintoism is the belief of gods representing objects in nature, such as flowers, trees, rocks, and rivers. Buddhism was introduced to Japan in the 6th century by the mainlands, establishing itself in Nara. Over time, it divided into other sectors, Zen Buddhism being the most popular. Buddhism is concerned with the soul and the afterlife, while Shintoism is the spirituality of this world and this life. This explains why the 2 religions go hand in hand with each other for many Japanese. The Japanese typically turn to Shintoism for celebration of birth or marriage. However, funerals are usually Buddhist ceremonies. A common saying in Japan is, "We live as Shintoists, but we die as Buddhists." There is a holiday of importance called the New Year, which is celebrated from the 1st to 3rd of January. People usually visit ancestral graves to pray for late relatives. Notably, the first shrine visit of the New Year is also important to secure good luck for the year ahead. We have learned many new things about Japanese culture, including the different eras that made Japan what it is today, a bit about the language and dialect of Japanese, family structure, education, the appropriate and traditional clothing of Japan, the social hierarchy, simple etiquette, and the 2 religions of Shintoism and Buddhism. We hope to continue to learn more about Japanese culture with time, as it is a very interesting country to study.